Welcome, everyone, to Wizards and Warp Drives, the podcast where three grown-ass men get deeply nerdy about the things they love. My name is Nacho, and joining me, as per usual, is the mighty glue stick himself, Mr. AJ Pickett, and the return of Fred Wheeler from How to RPG. He is back.
I have a computer that works now and a lozenge in my mouth because it seems like maybe my body will be going on holiday shortly rather than my computer.
So, AJ's got tooth pain. Fred is coming down with something.
The lack of teeth pain, yeah.
So we're all middle-aged men on drugs at the moment. Not the party type. So I'll apologise in advance if anything goes off topic. But yeah, now Fred's back. He had some time off, unfortunately, due to his hard drive dying on him. And we've decided to pick up where we left off with the Star Wars prequels. Prophecy, politics, and controversy is what I decided to call this. So, George Lucas, the return, the decision to make the prequels and the build-up to the Phantom Menace. So he developed these backstories as early as the 70s, but he sort of laid the groundwork for the prequels in the original films. But he decided to shelf them due to the sort of limitations of the technology at the time. However, after seeing the pre-screening of Jurassic Park in '92, he believed that the visual effects could finally live up to what he thought they should be. So, he's even quoted to saying after the Jurassic Park that I had tears in my eyes. A major gap had been crossed. He saw this as a light bulb moment that allowed the prequels to move forward. So, so he loosely sort of plotted nine films together, and he decided to go ahead and announce them in 1993 via Variety magazine. And in November of 1998, a teaser trailer premiered 6 months ahead of The Phantom Menace. This trailer became a media sensation, with fans flooding to theaters just to see it and then leaving immediately before the film started.
Crazy.
It's groundbreaking online as well. It was the first ever trailer to appear online, and it was kind of. I guess that's now considered the new norm, because you got to remember this is before Facebook or YouTube or any of that. I remember going to the library to see this trailer. It took about 4 hours to download.
Yeah,
for about 30 seconds.
This is the early days of the internet, so we're all still on ICQ playing MUDs, and there's barely any video online. No video conferencing chats or no online role-playing gaming. Primitive times. We're chipping stone, so to speak.
As people of a certain age, the hype around the Phantom Menace was like, because we'd been starved. We thought we were going to get no more Star Wars. What was it, 98, 99 it came out. And I think Jedi was 83. So that's a long time between drinks. We were thirsty, just even that poster, the marketing campaign was phenomenal. They had the poster of young Anakin and then the shadow behind him of Vader. But anyone want to comment on this particular build-up before we get into them?
Right from the get-go, Star Wars had learned its lesson about marketing and where the real money was in the franchise, and that was toys, right? So the number one thing that really got me was the CGI and stuff of the robots, and the droid army was really, really compelling. If I sort of skip ahead a bit to like the later things with the latest movies, it was more sort of nostalgia, iconic scenes. Like what really got me with one of the previews, with the X-Wings coming in over water and kicking up a big contrail behind them. that really sold me on like what Star Wars was all about. That iconic spaceship and that real, dynamic visual scene and stuff. But with the preview trailer, it was just sort of shock and awe. Look what we've accomplished, and you've never seen anything like it before, which is kind of what the original trilogy of Star Wars was all about. You've never seen anything like this before. It's groundbreaking, and we hadn't really seen anything like it since, well, I mean, Lord of the Rings after that with Massive, and the massive battles and things that we had with that was the next sort of big technological leap forward, I think. But yeah, I mean, the can't be overstated how impressive, a huge big drone army against, all the Gungans and stuff like that looked on screen, because we hadn't seen that sort of thing.
There's something to be said about having a gap and creating hype. I think, the Phantom Menace had a massive amount of hype because there's been so long between drinks, and same with The Force Awakens. When that got announced, we also got hyped, and that's something that I feel was gone now because we're just been oversaturated with like Marvel and Star Wars. That you almost sometimes need a break from these big franchises to really miss them.
Yeah. Now they have to concentrate on quality and acting and
well, I think
those sort of things.
I don't think making too many movies is the issue. I think it's making too many mediocre or shitty movies or TV series is a problem for Marvel and Star Wars.
Yeah.
So I looked at sort of the build up that I answered your question. I did some research. So apparently George's kids had mostly grown up and they'd gone to school. So he would drop them off at school, and then the rest of the day, he really didn't have anything else to do other than manage his company or companies, because he had more than one, and not just, Industrial Light and Magic. So George decided that this is probably a good time to do a new film project. Since his kids were at school and he didn't need to sort of be home all the time, and he'd done, all of the, baby through to 5-year-old stuff. So he realized that if he didn't do another Star Wars movie now, that he never would, because they took so much time to make and required so much effort from him. And because even though he tried to take a back seat when making Empire Strikes Back, he realized that he was still on set with the director, helping and guiding things anyway. So because of that, and because it takes so long to make, he decided he would do another Star Wars movie rather than a different project. And I remember him saying he was more interested in Darth Vader's story, or Anakin Skywalker's origin story, then continuing from Return of the Jedi and moving forward. That was he thought that was a more interesting story. For me, I think that the vast majority of the audience didn't necessarily care about Darth Vader's story, in my opinion. I didn't care about it. I really had no desire to see Anakin Skywalker fall to the dark side, because in my head, I already sort of had the basic idea. Okay, he starts off good, he falls to the dark side. We had enough in the original movies to sort of put that forward. The only other problem too, and I remember my brother thinking it was a really good idea, and he loved the idea, and he was really excited. And I said, I'm not, David. And the reason is I know what the outcome of the story is. And one of the important things about telling a story is not knowing the outcome of the story. So I found that the excitement around the Phantom Menace, in particular for my brother and my sisters, was huge, because you've got to remember, they're a new generation. They had never seen the original trilogy in the theaters. I had, and they didn't. That's how big of a gap there was, right? A whole generation. And so I was very suspicious of the whole Phantom Menace coming out. And then the news websites, the media frenzy around Star Wars, this new film, was hilarious. It was just unbelievably nuts. It was crazy. It was definitely overhyped by the media. And I was really I liked the idea of another Star Wars movie, but it's not the Star Wars movie I wanted. I wanted to continue on from Luke and Han and Leia. I didn't give a shit about Anakin Skywalker. And I think
Mm.
George was actually wrong that the technology to make these movies, as we'll discuss, was probably not where it needed to be successful. But we'll get to that, I'm sure.
Mm.
I think you're right. It wasn't. It immediately lost me from the opening crawl. So excited to see this film. Sit down, opening crawl. The Trade Federation is blocking. It was just this whole bunch of political stuff straight out the gate, and you're like, "What? This is about space wizards. This isn't about tax." So we'll get into the Phantom Menace. Okay, so the Phantom Menace, the plot. Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn discovers a young Anakin Skywalker, a gifted boy with a mysterious future. Qui-Gon senses Anakin's significance, but the Jedi Council is wary, especially as the Sith may re-emerge. A climactic duel with Darth Maul on Naboo results in Qui-Gon's death, leading to Obi-Wan to train Anakin, setting up the complex journey in motion.
Mm.
So, yeah, the themes, I guess, of this one was it felt very political. It was an examination of democracy and the rise of a dictatorship, and the implications of taxation and trade disputes. And it also had heavy Christian vibes. Like Anakin is like the chosen one, even down to the whole virgin birth.
Yeah. They really underplayed that in the movie. It was just like, oh, there was no father. And that's pretty much all the mention of it there was. I mean, It's a big deal, right? It's like, is that commonplace in the galaxy? I kind of feel like that should have been the lead. Right at the start of the movie, it should have been zooming in on the planet and then down into, this little dusty slave town and this particular event, and maybe have some sort of, I don't know, the animals acted weird, or there was some sort of convergence of stars or something to that this special, I don't know, a bright star and some three traveling sand people giving gifts or something. I don't know.
Sand people. Doesn't help that.
I do not want to see the story of the birth of Christ in my Star Wars movie. Thank you very much. But it's nice to you. At least you're presenting a new idea that might have been a little bit more successful, right?
Yeah. But no, we start off with.
We all identify that story. Not most of us.
Yeah. But no, it's like dioxin gas, and they take a deep breath and then ignore it. It's like dioxin gas. If you take a deep breath and you smelt it, you're already dead. It's one of the most toxic substances known.
Didn't help that Qui-Gon Jinn looks a bit like Jesus as well.
Yeah, well, yeah.
I thought Darth Maul was really underplayed in this film. He featured heavily in the hype, and he was hardly in it. The parts he was in was really cool.
Yeah, he was. I guess they were just going for he's threatening because he's silent and intimidating looking, but
it got criticised badly. It came out to really good reviews, and then just I think everyone's kind of digested it, and then
first came the bought and paid for reviews, and then came the public reviews, and the two were very different from each other.
Jar Jar Binks was heavily criticised to the point that he was removed pretty much from the remainder of the films, and the actor Ahmed Best also faced mental health struggles after the role because he was abused so heavily. Positives, I want to say, the podcasting scene, the John Williams score, the lightsaber fight, also the introduction of midichlorians.
Oh yeah, that's the other thing where they really dropped the ball, because I mean, people were like, the whole thing, I think that was George's reaction to people actually making a religion out of the Force, right? And the fact that I guess he wasn't very comfortable with that, so he decided to socially engineer or remove that from the franchise, which is his right as a creator, but also an incredibly fucking arrogant thing to do. Like, by the way, fandom and all the people who take this seriously and have identified parts of your life with it, nah. I'm not comfortable with that. I'm gonna change it. It's like, no, no, we're gonna carry on anyway. I mean,
Well, see, having done a bit of philosophy at university, I was actually quite surprised when that came up. Yeah. Um, and the thing for me with the midichlorians was this was sort of like the concept of the super being
mm,
affecting the very reality of the world around you on a subatomic level, like at its very core and root. This is sort of the message that midichlorians were about. It's not the midichlorians. It's not like these little organisms or bacteria or virus running around having a good time, some of them being angry and some of them not. It was about another sort of species or being affecting that. And
mm,
that's actually very, very advanced in terms of theology and philosophy. It is not a popular way of thinking.
mm.
And I thought that was quite revolutionary. I don't have a problem with the midichlorian story itself. I don't think that was the thing that brought down the movie. I think there are a lot of other things that created problems, but we'll get to them.
I think we're being too generous to George. Like midichlorians is basically mitochondria, right? So that's where he's got the idea from. Is that like there's these organisms that live inside other organisms that give them certain abilities. Like our mitochondria gives us our cells the ability to process oxygen, and they were absorbed symbiotically long ago, which makes our cells eukaryotes and able to survive in an oxygen-rich environment, because otherwise it would be toxic to them. So there's that. So as a biologist, I'm immediately put off by the fact that he's just gone with like junk science kind of thing. But then we add value to it afterwards. We fill in the gaps for George, and basically you start making excuses, and you start writing the correcting the setting yourself in your own mind, sort of thing, and the fandom sort of takes up the slack. So things that the Star Wars galaxy far away and long ago, so it's not our galaxy. So that's the main thing. And you come up with this compelling idea of what if there's different physical laws, different environmental concerns in this galaxy that are very different from ours. One thing that is very, very clear in the Star Wars galaxy is sound propagates through space. So there is some sort of ether or medium in the Star Wars galaxy that it requires them to have S-foils. So they actually are moving through some sort of medium. And when they lock the S-foils, they're actually stabilizing the X-wing for its maneuverability like it's an aeroplane. It's basically popping up airfoils. When we see the one of the big like star destroyers pop in out of hyperspace high above in orbit, and you can see it from the ground, you hear it arrive. So it's somebody, this ship is arriving in space and you can hear it on the ground. So that's kind of interesting. So now you've got this idea of like, well, maybe the midichlorians are permeating the entire galaxy because they live in this environment, and they live and so they're propagated from all these different planets because they've actually moved through the galaxy. We have warp capable, hyperspace capable life forms like space whales and stuff like that in the galaxy of Star Wars. And yeah, so we start to fill in the gaps and say, well, yeah. And then, of course, we've got Princess Leia much later. She floats through space. She should have been violently decompressed, but no, she was fine, because it's a different galaxy.
To be fair, AJ, I get your point. But
yeah.
when it came to midichlorians and I heard the word midichlorians, it was I couldn't care less.
Yeah.
It was only when George started talking about the wills and how they interacted with the midichlorians, I was like, oh, I know where that comes from. That's from some very sort of offshoot theology and philosophy of how rather than one supreme being or many supreme beings, you have a supreme or a sort of overarching species that has become so advanced that it can affect everything at a microscopic level, and I thought that was quite clever. I was actually quite interested to see that kind of story, but let's not get caught up on midichlorians, because that's not the downfall of this movie at
No,
all.
no.
or the trilogy.
It was just the grease on the slippery slope. Let's put it that way.
There's a argument here as well, I think, for hype versus expectation. Did it have unrealistic expectations put upon it?
Very hard to answer that, because we only had the reality that there was. I can't really imagine. Like, I can think of certain, like, the coolness that Favreau and those guys brought back to Star Wars with Boba Fett and the Mandalorian. That was cool, right? That was
Yeah.
there was a certain amount of, like, rock and roll involved in those. It's just like, this is Star Wars. This is the cool thing about Star Wars. This is why Boba Fett was so cool.
Grogu or Baby Yoda is kind of what he was trying to do with Jar Jar Binks, but that was just done so badly. It was that.
Yeah, that's very George Lucas. That's very that's very Spielbergy,
Yeah.
Grogu.
So what's your favorite and least favorite part of the Phantom Menace? Like, just pick one positive, one negative each.
Okay.
My favorite is lightsabers going through steel bulkheads and chopping the shit out of tons and tons of droids, because you don't really get to see that in the original movie, how devastating a weapon the lightsaber really is. And that's where we start to see it. Before then, it was just light show swordsmanship, and the fight between Ben Kenobi and Vader was really quite pathetic compared to the fight between Qui-Gon and Darth Maul. I mean, that was serious acrobatic force-assisted lightsaber battle, and the epic soundtrack. Da, 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 yeah, I mean, I've listened to that in so many role-playing games afterwards. It's one of the best bit of music ever. It was fantastic.
Alex Guinness wasn't going to do any somersaults, no.
No. His main accomplishment there was setting himself up for retirement by taking a chunk of the merchandise.
Least favorite?
Oh, Jar Jar. Has to be Jar Jar. Yeah, I'm not as anti Jar Jar as in most people, but yeah. Oh, yeah. I can. Yeah, it was cringe. It was just pure cringe. Misa. I was like, oh. I could understand Qui-Gon at the start saying, just because you can speak doesn't mean you're intelligent. That was a great line.
Good.
So I guess my feedback's going to be a little bit different then. I honestly didn't think there was anything particularly wrong with the plot for either of the movies, except that there are, in all of them, including The Phantom Menace, so many holes in the story, like big, huge, disjointed holes, or just giant leaps of logic that quite often, when you combine them, because there were so many, you kind of get a disjointed mess. And I remember seeing George Lucas watch the movie completed before it was going to be released, and his feedback, and everybody who watched the movie with him, was it's a disjointed mess and it's too late to fix it because we're kind of locked in. So he knew there was a problem before he released the movie. And I think because there's so many story plot things going on, there's so much going on, it's not the super simple Star Wars. So I think the Phantom Menace suffered from some very boring scenes where I could just about have fallen asleep, or really be quite happy to go and have a really long piss in the toilet while I wait for the movie to finish.
Yeah, I have to say, I agree. I didn't give a shit about the relationship between Padme and Anakin the entire way through. Like, Padme was great character, but the relationship between those two was really, really just disjointed and downplayed. And they just skipped over too much stuff. There wasn't enough risk. There was no drama between the Jedi and them. They should have been suspected. They should have been compromising themselves to continue this love affair. But there was no chemistry between those two. No chemistry at all.
For Phantom Menace, I felt like the story was far too complicated. We have a lot of jumping back and forth. And I noticed this with a lot of the other movies too, as we jump back and forth to different things that are happening in different places around the galaxy at the wrong time. in many cases where we needed to keep going with the flow of whatever that scene was. Um, I really hated just about every fucking Naboo scene there was. They were the most boring. Them slicing through droids. There was no drama. I was not convinced that these Jedi were at any kind of risk. Most of the Jedi fight scenes with the robots sucked, as far as I'm concerned. I was convinced at this point that he had presented the Jedi in such a way, because these were Jedi, like they were the real thing. They weren't sitting on a planet hiding from everybody, in a swamp, or dead ghosts, or trying to be a Jedi and training to be one. They had already done it. And what you suddenly realize is there's no drama with these guys, because they just don't show any concern. They're always calm. What I did like about the movie, outside of the stuff that I didn't like, is I liked the Tatooine scenes, even with young Anakin Skywalker and Padme and the Jedi. I thought most of those scenes weren't too bad. I really liked the pod race scene, because I rewatched it and I thought to myself, this is still exciting. Even though I know the outcome of the race and I know what's going to happen in the race, I still feel it from the music and what's going on. I still felt like I was invested. And then I guess the cream of the crop on top of that was the Sith battle between Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, the two of them fighting Darth Maul. And that final battle was pretty significant for me. And I think it really ramped up once the two were separated, the two Jedi were separated. Once Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon are separated, and it's just Qui-Gon against this Sith apprentice, or whatever it is. That was really where I felt like it started to hum really quite nicely. It hummed with the pod race. It hummed there. I felt like we were back to Star Wars. We're dealing with what Star Wars does. Heck, even the battle above Naboo in the ships, the spaceships, felt like Star Wars, but it didn't feel like it was risky. I was pretty convinced that they're not going to kill the kid in a spaceship.
Well, you know what happens to him.
Yeah, because he's not gonna die. You don't have to concern yourself. And this is the problem with making a movie about something you already know the outcome to. And then the only thing that disappointed me in that fight was when Obi-Wan is hanging off this big, huge shaft, and Darth Maul's above him, ready to take him out, and he jumps up in the air and pulls the lightsaber into his hand, jumps behind him. So there's more than enough time for Darth Maul to slice him.
I have the high ground. Don't do it. Yeah.
Yeah, and slice him in half. And I'm like, when I saw that, I didn't have to see another movie to know that that was the biggest bullshit under the sun for me. I lost my investment in that scene as soon as they did that, and then I saw Darth Maul tumbling down the shaft in two pieces when it should have been bloody Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Obi-Wan rolled a natural 20, mate.
Yeah. I would have gotten rid of the Gungans entirely, because the entire Naboo thing, like the ecology of Naboo, like we're going through the planet's core in this water world and the underwater like thing, and it's like, why did the Gungans come to the surface to fight the droids in the first place? They should have just stayed underwater.
I think that was just more to showcase the effects than anything else.
I would have been much more impressed if the droids went underwater and they're fighting, and seeing what like laser blasts underwater and stuff would have been much more interesting. No, I would have gone with what was his name?
I do like that. There's always a bigger fish line.
Yeah, that was okay, but it was yeah.
I hated those. They did that twice. 2 scenes with the same thing happens, and I was not scared for them at all on every occasion. I'm sorry, but the line was funny, but only mildly funny the first time, and the second time it was just cringe. That scene pissed me off a lot.
Yeah, no, I would have gone with Watto, the Toydarian, the junkyard dealer. I would have had them on the planet with the Toydarians, where the force powers don't work on them. And
he was a cool character.
And it's all about money and merchandise for those guys. So outside, like, that was really the outer rim, right? So the Empire doesn't matter here. Your credits are no good. You're so far away from the center of politics and turmoil and stuff that it's a struggle just to get engine parts, for your fancy Naboo ship.
It's got that cool. He tries to do the Jedi hand wipe thing.
Yeah,
And it's like,
yeah.
what?
So I would have started the movie with the princess already on board, Padme already on board. You don't know that she's the handmaiden, and it's essentially in media res. So they crash landed on Tatooine. So you're back to the familiar place. So you've got nostalgia immediately. Oh, we're back on Tatooine. There's action going on that you have to pick up and understand as you go. It's like, oh, their planet was boycotted by a trade federation. We don't need to know the details further than that. That the Empire is non-functional because there's somebody manipulating, so that there's no consensus and no decisions are being made, and the Empire in the Outer Rim is no longer effective. It's just like, oh no, the Hutts are in charge because the Empire just there's no, and we haven't seen a Jedi here for generations. You guys, what do you guys do? You're just political tools now, and that would have been a more compelling start for me because you would have been straight into the action. The pod race, Anakin, all that sort of stuff. Yeah, the pod race, Anakin, all that sort of stuff. The Sith turning up and having a fight out of nowhere, like what the hell's going on? That would have been more interesting, and we could have skipped the entire Naboo scene entirely.
And the Coruscant, going back to Coruscant was like, it lost me. It really did, and it didn't feel like it was. I know what they were trying to do. They were trying to set up the Emperor.
Yeah.
But shit.
We didn't need all those conversations. We didn't.
Yeah.
No.
A lot of it was just a bit too much explanation by show. But I don't know how to fix that movie. I thought really hard about it. All I know is the scenes that I liked. And ultimately, it doesn't matter because it's still it cost $120, $115 million to make. And it made $700-800 million, and it had a marketing budget of like 20 million or something like that. It was financially successful. So ultimately, even though people were not terribly happy with it, it was not made for me or AJ or for you, Nacho. It was made for my brothers and sisters, a new generation.
Yeah. And tell you what, Fred, in 5 years' time, we'll get AI to make a new movie for us.
And I probably won't be interested. We'll get back to that.
Yeah.
One down, two to go, I guess. My least favorite was anything to do with Jar Jar Binks or the political stuff was boring. I agree with Fred. I really like the pod race, and the thing I like about the pod race, it does go on a little bit too long, but I did like how every pod racer looked different. Like it had weight to it. And I like, you could tell, like it looked like it had all been made from junk, like they'd all assembled stuff from bits and pieces of junk they'd found on the planet. And also the sound design of the pod race was phenomenal. But it did go on a little bit too long, that pod race. But
there's a lot of CGI in it. But they actually built out of wood and other materials, fiberglass and so forth. They built the actual pod racing vehicles.
Yeah,
I know because I saw the scenes where the storm came through and wiped everything out, and they had to try to put everything back together.
Yeah. The sound design on that pod race as well is phenomenal.
Yeah.
All right.
I really like the Doug species as well. What's his name? Sebulba. That's quite interesting. But we learned nothing of the fact that their planet Malastare was taken over by the Empire and they got basically evicted. That was kind of interesting. Like the alien thingy with the 3 eye stalk. That's kind of looked like a goat thingy. They took over the Doug's planet because of politics.
Right.
Anyway,
Attack of the Clones. Let's get on.
Deep lore there.
40 minutes on Phantom Menace.
Yeah.
Okay, 10 years after the events of the Phantom Menace, Anakin Skywalker is assigned to protect Senator Padmé after an assassination attempt. Anakin struggles with his feelings for Padmé while grappling with the Jedi Code. Padmé.
Yeah. Sorry. On behalf of the listeners, I had to correct you.
If you find that difficult, just go with Pume, and that's close enough.
Pad Thai.
Okay, keep going.
As tensions rise between the Galactic Republic and the Separatists, Anakin and Padmé uncover a conspiracy involving a clone army. The film accumulates with the outbreak of the Clone Wars. So this is... This is a lot different film. I enjoyed. This was a lot more faster paced.
I would have had, you know how Obi-Wan goes and talks to Dex at the cafe, the diner, and it turns out that he and Obi-Wan have got like some sort of a shady mercenary past. I would have had it so that any Jedi spaceship would have been tracked by the Jedi Council, and since he's going on a covert mission, I would have had him get on board the old junky mercenary ship of that guy, then both travel to the thing, and then have his old companion killed by Jango Fett. That would have been a much more interesting thing, because now he's emotionally invested and stuff. But instead, it was just like a spy mission and him sort of going, sneaking in and stuff, and then the whole Dad, Qui-Gon's here, Gon Wee's here. That was oh, the pain of hearing a Kiwi accent in Star Wars.
Yeah, I was going to say this is where we got the Kiwis. Production shifted to. We'll get into that later, but production shifted to Australia.
Yeah.
Where a lot of New Zealand and Australian actors were brought in, mostly as background actors, but Tamara Morrison was quite famous at the time, and he scored a significant lead role, which, he is still doing today.
He's a lovely guy.
But yeah, kind of as a Kiwi, it did take me out of the film a little bit, because, it was a bit strange hearing your own accent in a Star Wars film.
Yeah.
I didn't care.
You didn't care?
I didn't care.
Yeah. So, it's got a lot more of a, war journalism influences from World War II, combat films. It's less political, I feel. It's definitely a faster paced, more action based film.
Yeah.
It introduced us to Hayden Christensen, who got a bit of flack for his stiff and rather flat performance.
Yeah, robotic.
Not the
Jar
only
Jar
one.
Binks. Jar Jar Binks had a very reduced role.
Mm-hmm.
But
I think
pivotal, as we discover later on.
It got mixed reviews, this one. Many critics praising the action, but noting issues with the plot and character development. Right, who wants to get into Attack of the Clones?
I like the idea of just the general idea of the clones. I thought it was really good. I thought it was really compelling. I thought the idea of, these accelerated, and because for me, it struck a chord with the idea of in 2000 AD how you had like cloned judges and things like that. That was kind of cool, and we hadn't seen anything like that before. The idea of using cloning to that degree, like it was a logical. It was a what if scenario. What if like cloning was if you really did like make an army of clones, what sort of psychological effect would it have, and what sort of how would you do it? Like how would you train them and stuff? And having them all training together and stuff like that, and that institution and them just being a product was really, really interesting. Yeah, aside from anything else, I think Temuera Morrison acted really well. He was really good Jango. You could see in his eyes that he was very concerned that a Jedi had shown up. And also there was that thing of like he wanted one unaltered clone for himself as a son. So we got the origin of Boba Fett there, which is really cool. So I felt more for Boba Fett and him seeing his dad killed than I did about Padme dying.
Worst ever take your son to work day.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. And of course we had Samuel L. Jackson who didn't get to say motherfucker the entire movie, which was sad.
He did request a purple lightsaber though.
Yeah.
Apparently that role was originally written for Tupac.
Shit. I did not know that.
Samuel L. Jackson said didn't care what he was. He said, just stick me in a stormtrooper outfit and shoot me straight away. I don't care.
But
Mm.
he did request a purple lightsaber though.
Yeah, eventually. Well, they showed up and they gave him his garb, and he was expecting it as a stormtrooper outfit, and then they gave him, "Am I a Jedi?"
Yeah, yeah.
They didn't even tell him. He said,
Yeah, eventually that made its way into the canon that the purple lightsaber is the lightsaber color of a consul Jedi. So that's the essentially a diplomat Jedi. Yeah.
I like the gladiator bit in this film.
Mm-hmm.
That was it reminds me a lot bit of John Carter.
Yeah. More big monsters. That's what we needed more of. Big alien monsters. Like the goober fish were fun, but I like the cat thingy and the noises that they made and that sort of thing. The fact that they're all fighting them together at the same time. Yeah,
I enjoyed Attack of the Clones a lot more than I did The Phantom Menace.
Yeah. And of course those insect people and the noises they'd make. That was another kind of like you hadn't seen something like that since the Wookiees, where people were imitating the sounds that those things made, or it was an accomplishment to make the sort of thing. I have used that so many times in Dungeons and Dragons for goblin language and stuff.
Okay. It's Genosians, right?
Genosians, yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Okay. So is it time for me to give me my feedback on Attack of the Clones?
Yeah, mate.
Okay. All right. So the Attack of the Clones for me, I felt like that was even slower than the Phantom Menace. It was so slow. And it was even more boring when I was watching it because it's a romantic soap opera. Well, you know how George has always said Star Wars is a sci-fi soap opera? Well, we got full-blown soap opera in this damn thing between Anakin and Padme. And I'm like, oh my God, are we really going down? And it was not, I like romantic movies, but it did not sell me on that. I was not convinced that these two would fall in love. Frankly, I thought that Amidala would have ditched this whiny teenage shit that he was and gone for somebody else because he's not endearing. I did not like Anakin in Attack of the Clones at all. And there was a lot of political maneuvering that we had to go through, a lot of investigation, Obi-Wan going and doing this, and Anakin's getting involved as well. And then we get the early sort of stages, the threat of war realized, it finally comes forward. But for me, episode 2, it doesn't feel risky. I did not feel like there was a lot of risk taking place in this movie. There are some key things where I might feel differently, but overall risk and excitement was very low for me. That speeder chase in Coruscant was the most ridiculous, uninspiring thing I have seen. I was not excited. I'm sure you can make that exciting, but they didn't make that exciting for me. I had to tolerate the Jedi Council that was full of the most stupid ass Jedi Masters I've ever seen in my life. And I've never seen Jedi Masters outside of Yoda and Obi-Wan. And these guys were just awful. They were just terrible. The Coruscant scenes were bad. Almost all of the Naboo scenes were terrible. The Camino scene was boring as hell. Even the Tatooine scene was pretty much boring. The only things that really had me connected in any way and even remotely interested or was all right for me was exploding Amidala's spaceship at the beginning. I was like, oh shit, I know that ship's got her on it. And I know that's Padman. Did they just kill her at the very beginning of the movie? And I was like, oh, wow. And then, no, she's not dead. She's, yeah.
I was more sad that Jay Lagaya got blown up, the actor playing the captain of the guard.
Yeah. So that had me for just
another Kiwi actor, by the way.
Yeah.
Very famous from Shortland Street and
Yeah, don't go watching Shortland Street, people. Just leave that one alone.
No.
And then Anakin's...
It's our version of Neighbours.
Yeah. Then Anakin's mother dying. I thought was a really powerful scene. I thought I was really invested, and it was not long enough, and they did not give Anakin time enough to really grieve and set it up in such a way that the shift from bawling your eyes out to sheer rage and going through and killing all of the sand people was a thing. I felt like that scene was stuffed up pretty badly.
Yeah. Later on with the where you get to see in the sort of prequel thing, you know how Vader is going after the plans, and he's just mowing his way through the ship inexorably until eventually it disappears and goes off, and that's the start of the New Hope movie where Princess Leia and stuff. That should have been him going through the storm, through the Sand People camp, and just killing and murdering everyone and just, you see him as a force of absolute death and evil destruction, like the dark side personified. That would have been much better. And then he has to come back to normal people and go, "Oh God, I've done terrible things. I'm capable of terrible things." You know. And then that would have been the linchpin where Padme understands something deep and dark, like they share a secret about him and a concern that, you know, he has, that Jedi Council has got it wrong. He's not this, you know, this great thing. There's a real risk in him, you know, having power and stuff like that. That would have been much more interesting. I would have gone that way.
I had a real problem with him, you know, when Anakin goes to Tatooine, discovers his mother's missing and been captured by Sand People, and goes out, and you get this really powerful scene and music, and they cut away and they go to Obi-Wan, and I'm like, shit, don't do that. Don't do that to me. You've set it up. Keep going. If they'd gone with that and led into the mother, finding the mother and so forth, I think that would have been much better cut and scene set up for me. The Geonosian War was much more exciting, but I've also found there was so much digital stuff going on now. It was like system overload in my brain. And I remember this when I first watched it. And when I rewatched it, I was like, geez, it's the same thing. I just, there's so much going on. They've certainly given me the impression there's a full-blown war going on. But I also know that none of these things that I'm seeing in front of me are real. It's all digital. And so that didn't help. And I think this is one of the problems that these prequels had, is that digital is not convincing. It just isn't. And then the lightsaber fights were all right, or in some cases emotional, you know. So I'm all right with the battle between the Jedi and the droids to a certain degree, but I almost felt like, geez, they're just dropping like flies, these Jedi to these droids. And I know there's lots of droids, but where's this all leading to?
So there's one part of this film that no one's touched on, something that we'd been waiting a long, long time to see, and that was Yoda spark a lightsaber and kick some ass.
Yeah. Okay, so Christopher Lee is just pure win in anything that he's in. And he played Dooku really well, I thought. But he just didn't get enough screen time.
He's a great actor, yeah. Everything he's been, and a great guy, he was a great legendary person.
Yeah.
But I think I like when Yoda's he walks and he's got his little hobble and he's all old, and then it was, I don't know. I don't know how I felt about. I still don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah, I feel the same way. It was so out of place to go from Yoda being an old fart who can barely sort of hobble around to he is bouncing around. And I remember seeing George talking to the people who had to design that scene, and they're saying, how do we make this look impressive and exciting and pull it off without it just coming off as being really funny and silly?
A guy being attacked by a green chihuahua with a lightsaber, yeah.
You just wanted him to grab him and just bash him against the wall.
Yeah. I think it would have been more interesting if Yoda had just gone and then like a bunch of lightsabers and he was just fighting him with like drone lightsabers. That would have been cool.
The somersault game, the somersaults really. There was a lot more somersaults in this film.
Yeah, yeah.
All the Jedis were yeah.
Should be cut in half. Should be in two pieces by now. All the somersaults.
Yeah.
That must have been something they were teaching at the academy.
Well, Yoda had the high ground, you know. Judge me by my size, will you? Forces are powerful, ally. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Revenge of the Sith.
Right.
Anakin Skywalker becomes increasingly drawn to the dark side, influenced by Chancellor Palpatine. The Jedi Council senses a growing threat, but struggles to maintain control. As the Clone Wars reach their climax, Anakin's fear of losing Padme leads him to a fateful choice, resulting in the rise of Darth Vader and the fall of the Jedi. This is my favorite out of the three. I do like this one, and not because it's a good film. I think it's shit. But it's probably the most referenced in memes. I think out of all the three. You've already referenced lines from it about 4 times already, AJ.
Yeah. I have the high ground. Yeah. Favorite bits is the Order 66. The tragic death of that. I really felt the death of all the Jedi. That was intense. And yeah, Yoda doing the whole he felt a great disturbance in the Force, harkened back to the original movies where Ben Kenobi, old Kenobi, had felt the death of a planet, and the fact that all of the Jedi were connected to each other. And that's why it had to be coordinated and all happened at the same time, because otherwise they would have sensed that something was up. And if there was any stagger or delay, it wouldn't have worked. So it was orchestrated from the get-go, really showed the intelligence of Palpatine, that he had planned this out from the very get-go, and that they couldn't sense him. They were blind to his activities. That was really cool. What I would like to have seen is, instead of Palpatine essentially manipulating him and putting him into the Jedi Council through sort of political influence, he should have said, "I'm aware of your relationship with Padme, and I will expose you unless you do what I want." So he should have coerced him instead of trying to convince him. He should have dominated or tried to dominate Darth Vader from the very get-go. So that would have been more interesting, because he was already a whiny bitch character. So it would have just played into that, essentially. That's my take.
I really like the opening of this film. I think it just opens with a bang. A really cool villain we've never seen before. Somersaults galore. He somersaults out of the ship.
A lot of people should be cut in half in this movie.
Yeah. We also get to see R2-D2 do some cool shit too. R2-D2 gets into a fight, which is pretty cool. The astromechs really shine out through this whole series. It was pretty cool. We get to see the origin of where R2-D2 comes from and meets C-3PO, and the origin of C-3PO being Anakin Skywalker's model kit, essentially. His pet project. So that was kind of cool. He's Darth Vader's droid. So yeah. Because that's the thing with these movies. They are connected through the droids. Not the kit. The droids are always present. They're the story of the droids through all the movies. They're always there. Even at the end, R2-D2 is comes awake again when Luke is discovered. Yeah, but that's
yeah. Well, it's one family, really, isn't it?
Yeah,
one family and their droids.
Yeah,
this one got
a story about a boy and his toys.
Praising its emotional depth and visual storytelling. I don't know about that. It's a complete opposite of the Phantom Menace. The Phantom Menace to me is slow and boring, and this one is fast paced, action packed, and thank God it was over.
Phantom Menace is aptly named. It's like there's a threat somewhere, but we don't see it. The entire movie, it's Phantom. I was waiting for the threat. I was waiting for the story, but it never showed up.
Mm.
was
Well, also
concealed.
too, it also marked because the Phantom Menace made a decent amount of money, right? Not as much as Star Wars did, the original one, if you take inflation into consideration. But Attack of the Clones was still financially successful because there was only 15 million to make it, and still a marketing budget of 20 million, and they made a good 500, 600 million off that movie.
Mm.
This one did more. It made more money than Attack of the Clones, and it had the same budget and same marketing, so it did all right. It did better, and people knew it was the end. I think one of the things for me with Revenge of the Sith is I think it is the better of the three movies. I'm not going to say that it is perfect in any way, but I definitely like it just like yourself, Nacho. Um, One of the things I almost forgot to mention in Attack of the Clones, when Anakin kills the Sand People, comes back and tells Padman that he killed Sand People, but not just Sand People, but women and children. And she does not say to him, "Oh my God, I can have nothing to do with you," and walk away. I thought that was a failure in dialogue right there. He could have said, "I had to kill Sand People. I killed Sand People because they hurt my mother." But if he'd said women and children, I just don't see that character staying with him. It was a
Mm.
break in logic for me, and I
Mm.
really hated that particular scene the most because I thought it had potential, but it was stuffed up, and
Mm.
that carries on right throughout the rest of that movie and into this movie, unfortunately, because it's still I just don't understand why these two people are together at
Yeah.
all. Again,
And again with when she goes to the big volcanic planet, that's after she's discovered he's already killed a bunch of youngling Jedi, right?
well,
So same thing again. It's like, why would she be with him? So you're going down a path I can't follow,
Um,
lady. He's far gone. He's already gone. The bus
yeah,
has left the building. Why are you there? It's like
yeah,
you should be fleeing.
yeah. But if you wanted
it's
to
probably
ask
the
me about,
biggest.
sorry,
And then
Sorry,
she
this is probably
died.
the
She
biggest
died of sadness.
weakness.
It's like, why? What?
The dialogue is probably the biggest weakness of the prequels, and I think that's because this is very much George Lucas's baby. Like, he's so much more involved in these films than he was in the original. Like, he didn't do he only directed A New Hope. He didn't direct Empire or Return of the Jedi. And he was more, I think, more about the visuals than, he should have got someone in to do some,
dialogue.
Yeah.
rewriting of the scripts and
I
tighten
mean,
it
if
up
you
a little bit.
ever
Sorry.
listen to George Lucas talk, he's not that good at dialogue
Yeah.
in real life
Yes.
either.
Yeah.
Mm.
Sorry, Fred. To interrupt.
No, that's right. So, okay, so Revenge of the Sith, definitely the better of them. The problem for me with Revenge of the Sith is I know where we're leading already. I already know the outcome. The political death of democracy and the war story was full of even more huge leaps of logic. Like I thought I saw a lot of them in the first two movies, but now it's even more horrendous. And some of the irrational things these characters do and the choices they make are just it goes right through the entire cast in terms of the characters that you have. Like nobody is doing anything that makes any bloody sense whatsoever. And it just goes on. And it reminds me of Young and the Restless, where you have a whole lot of people interacting with each other who really should be shot and chucked into a hole because they're not real people.
Mm.
You know what I mean? They just don't make any sense at all. The things that I like about the movie is the battle above Coruscant at the beginning. I thought that was interesting. It was funny. It had some depth to it. It was a little bit confusing at times as to why it was going down this way, and it was also huge jumps of logic and so forth. But I still thought it was an entertaining setup.
Mm.
Windu's death, like the death of Windu, was pretty impressive. I thought that was really good. Everything after he dies and falls out the window that Anakin does and the Emperor
Window
does.
goes out the window.
Yeah, Windu goes out the window. Once he goes out the window, that whole scene is just makes no fucking sense whatsoever to me. I did not like it after that. If anything, I was when I replay this scene in my head, I see Windu cutting down the Emperor and then chopping off Anakin's head. Would have been my preference, frankly. Order 66 was really powerful as a scene. I agree with AJ on that. I really felt that huge weight as all the Jedi are taken out by the soldiers. And, they don't see it coming, which I don't quite understand, because if they're in line with the Force, they can see into the future. And apparently they don't see very far into the future, only 2 seconds before they get shot. I really had a problem with the rationale, the logic of that scene, but I thought the scene was powerful. I thought all of the younglings getting wiped out in the temple was really powerful scene, but I also did not understand why it was Anakin, who only just apparently gone to the dark side. Suddenly he's the one, he's specifically cutting everybody down. I'm like, you're telling me you couldn't get somebody else to do that job? It's his job.
I think it's supposed to be like in the later movies where Thingamajiggy kills Han Solo, where he has to do that to achieve the next level of the dark side, but there's no setup for Anakin to do that whatsoever. So we understand that that's probably what's going on in the story after the fact, sort of metagamey, but we don't understand that during. There's no setup for it whatsoever. There's no compulsion for him to do that.
Yeah.
The other thing I think that was a real letdown was we finally had Wookiees on Kashyyyk in battle, and not one of them climbed a tree, not one of them used their forearm claws, not one of them used a bowcaster to snipe a bunch of them. It was shit, man. It was just like, oh, there's these weird looking droids that came out of the thing, and then just yeah.
So for me, that temple scene and it being Anakin specifically, who's the only one who seems to be cutting all these kids down and all these Jedi that are in the temple down, that lost it for me. If it had been somebody else, I'd be all right. If it had been another Sith Lord, or it had been an underling for the Emperor, I could see that. The Mustafar battle was fine. I thought and the battle between Yoda and the Emperor was fine. It was all right. I could deal with that. I think the most powerful scene in the entire movie is still the Mustafar battle between Obi-Wan and Anakin on Mustafar. That lightsaber battle at times was quite ridiculous, and it did take you out a little bit, but it still had that weight to the whole scene.
There was emotion between those characters. They'd sort of established the buddiness of them before, where they were less master and apprentice and more like buddy, a pair of cops who had been on the beat for a long time, which was a bit jarring because it didn't connect very much with the mental anguish and stuff that Anakin was supposed to be feeling. Also, at the very, very end, where we got the Force ghost of Anakin, I would have liked it if there was a whole bunch of spectral young Jedi ghosts who were staring off at him from the distance, going, "What the fuck?" Yeah, he brought them with him. He turned them into Force ghosts. So that would have been funny.
Okay,
haunted.
So we go through. We'll go through some of the legacy roles because there was a bit of recasting here and some of the new faces that they introduced.
So we have to hit on some of the themes. You talked about a few of them, but these three movies are all about tragedy, betrayal, political negotiations, political failure, romantic love, which is tragic, forbidden, and really poorly done.
Yeah,
unfortunately, war,
and misinterpreting prophecy.
Yeah, war. Yeah, misinterpreting prophecy, tyranny. Family death is full-blown soap opera stuff going on here. Because we have some family death going on here as well. I thought I would at least mention those. Go for it, man. Legacy roles. Let's go.
So, well, just to make that prophecy thing. So the prophecy was that he would bring balance to the Force. Yeah.
So much passion in the room.
So the prophecy was that he would bring balance to the Force, and I think it was just kind of ridiculous that they were all like on board with it. It's like, well, hang on a minute. At the moment, we've got no Sith, maybe possibly one Sith, and an entire galaxy full of good aligned Jedi.
There's always two.
Right. So it's like balance means we have to reduce it to 2 Jedi and 2 Sith. It's like, how is that going to be a good thing? No. I don't accept the fact that, they just went along with it. I think that, Mace was probably right in saying, no, I don't think so. And Yoda was like really skeptical about it the entire time. They should have been monitoring, and the pressure should have been on, and the observation of Anakin should have been much more intense, and his relationship with Padme would have been more intense as a result of that. That he had to every step of the way subvert and work against the Jedi to follow that obsession that he had with her, because it was kind of creepy from the beginning. It's like she said, "No, you're just a kid in my eyes. You're like a little brother," and he was like, "No, I've been lusting after you this entire time." It's like, there's something wrong with him, there's something a little bit wrong with it. He has no father figure in his life. It's a little bit creepy. Yeah, sorry.
There was a lot going on with the prequels, a lot more than the original films, for sure. All right, so we got Anakin Skywalker. He was cast twice. So young Anakin Skywalker, Jake Lloyd, the child version of Anakin that was discovered by Qui-Gon Jinn on Tatooine. That guy did not recover from this role.
He's a much better actor. he was actually pretty good.
And then he was later recast in Phantom Menace, well, just due to the way they set the timeline. Hayden Christensen, a gifted Jedi Knight with the fear of the loss that leads to the dark side of becoming Darth Vader. I actually quite like Hayden Christensen. I think he's grown into the role. I was quite excited to see him come back. He's a terrible actor. Everyone's gone eerily silent. Thoughts on those two?
He's kind of like Patterson, the Twilight guy. Just like he's what's that girl? Was it Kristen Stewart, the one who's got like one emotional? She's got one expression that she uses. It's like he's a one-trick pony.
Owen Wilson.
Wow, maybe, yeah. But I think I don't know. I would have liked to have seen the casting process and other actors that were considered for the role, because I think we're in the wrong universe. And
I think, to pull off the sympathetic vibe, he needed to be a little bit more charismatic.
Yeah,
you needed to have someone that you liked.
Yeah, he needed to be emotionally raw through the whole thing. He needed to, because there's a character that is driven by his emotions more than anything. He's doomed. He can never be a Jedi. He was too old to be trained as a Jedi. So it's like, why was he too old? Because he's already horny. That's the thing.
So the question has to be, did you feel sympathetic towards Anakin Skywalker when Jake was playing him in Phantom Menace?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
Yes, I did. Right. Did you feel sympathetic to Anakin Skywalker, played by Hayden Richardson? And is it completely his fault? Yeah. Is it completely his fault? Is it Hayden's fault only, or is it the script and the dialogue that he had to deliver that was part of the problem? And I think it was both of those things that did not help. And also, too, if you look at his interviews, he wanted to go to the dark side almost straight away, and like he was the wrong choice, because really he was they were trying to move him along too quickly. If anything, they really needed to find an interim. They probably should have gone with somebody else and then brought in Hayden and said he was like 20 years old in the third movie or something like that.
In the more the modern Star Wars movies with Adam Driver having those outbursts and like slicing up the console and stuff, because he's just really pissed off, and he slices the bucket, and the stormtroopers like, Jesus, and they get the hell out of there. That's what I would have wanted to see Christensen doing. Him just losing it on occasion and just like, fuck, and just slicing a droid in half, a helper droid, and just like, it's not real, it's not a person, and that sort of thing, and the other Jedi around him going, well, that's pretty questionable, but he's favored by the council and everything, so I guess it's okay. That would have been interesting, because you'd see that psychological, there's something wrong with this guy.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't think they should. I don't think they should have had it so much so that he was a victim of circumstance. I think they really needed to emphasize the fact that Darth Vader has evil in him. He is the balance of the Force. He's both good and bad. And when he's good, he's really good. When he's bad, he's really bad. That's what I would have liked. He was a one or the other dynamic character where there's no middle ground. There was just like extremes of one or the other. He's extremely in love. He's extremely pressured. That sort of thing, and that would have been a much more compelling thing. Yeah,
yeah.
Because subtle acting is not his forte.
He was only in for one film. Qui-Gon Jinn, Liam Neeson, the wise and independent Jedi Master who discovers Anakin's potential and believes in his destiny. He was solid, man.
Yeah,
solid. Yeah, thumbs up from us.
Loved him since Labyrinth. Loved him since Krull. since Krull, sorry.
Since Labyrinth.
Krull, sorry.
This was Obi-Wan, Ewan McGregor, the wise and skilled Jedi Master who trains Anakin Skywalker and plays a pivotal role in the Clone Wars. Great actor.
Love the guy.
Really enjoyed the part. He also suffered from really bad dialogue.
Yeah, just didn't take things seriously. He just brought humor into the wrong bits of the movie. Like his discussion, his interaction with Christopher Lee should have been much more intense. He should have been really sweating and feeling it, but he was quipping with the guy. The bit where he jumps in and says hello to Grievous. I think Grievous was a great character. To the bit where he sort of stops in and says hello to Grievous was a little bit over the top as well, but yeah, it sort of showcased just how ballsy the Jedi were. That was kind of cool. But yeah.
Hello there.
Hello there.
He's probably the most memed out of all the characters in this film.
Yeah.
I think Fred's got something to say on him.
I've got 2 or 3 sentences. I'm going to wait to the very end as much as I can. For all these characters, I'm going to say very little until the very end of it.
Padme, Natalie Portman, the Queen of Naboo, a strong advocate for peace, who is secretly married to Anakin.
Strangely both overutilized and underutilized at the same time. She's in too many scenes, and the scenes where she's doing her like thing. I almost think that like it was like on the scene like. They realized that some of the other characters that they were dealing with were kind of shit, and so they gave her more scenes in the movie to compensate. That's what it felt like. We didn't need to see a lot of those conversations between her and Anakin about the politics.
Actually, I want to get into this next guy because we haven't really talked about him, and I think he is possibly maybe the MVP of these entire prequels, and that is Palpatine. Palpatine. Jesus.
Played by who?
Ian McDiarmid. Did I say that right?
Yeah. Palpatine. Just think palpitating plasticine. There you go. Now you'll never forget it.
No. Palpitating plasticine.
Yeah,
say that
Palpatine.
3 times.
Palpatine.
Who ends up being, the Emperor. Great. He was great in these films.
He was. Yeah. Solid performance the entire way through.
And I'm glad that they've gone back and kind of like corrected him now, so he's consistently in all the films. He was great. He seemed to have a great time. He was chewing up the scenery. Great performance. Well cast. Really good.
Yeah.
We got some legacy characters return. We got C-3PO, R2-D2, and Yoda, all played by the original 3 actors.
All pretty solid.
And new ones that came in, Jar Jar Binks, we've talked about.
I think there was a bit of a letdown with the dialogue of R2-D2. It didn't really have the same eloquence of the original script. They just sort of repeated a lot of his previous dialogue. There was a little bit of cliche going on there. Like, beep, 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 was a little bit overplayed.
I don't know. What drugs are you taking today, dude?
I was waiting for you guys to cut me off.
You're going to comment on beep rather than a beep.
Yeah, beep, beep, beep. Like
whatever the fucking beeps they had.
Like,
Who
he's
cares?
notoriously the most foul-mouthed character, and he is responsible for being PG-13. That's for sure.
Out of all the dialogue problems I've got with these films, his is not part of them.
No, not mine either. So, yeah, we're not on board on this one. You need to take some more painkillers, mate, or something.
The bit where he squirts out oil and then sets the other droids on fire, for instance, was just pure,
Right, what version are you watching? And some of the these are these new characters that they were here to, some of them just to sell toys. Jar Jar Binks, Darth Maul, Jango Fett, Count Dooku, and General Grievous.
Grievous was interesting.
He was cool. It was a good design. It was a really interesting design. Yeah, he was in the film just the right amount of time. He didn't outstay his welcome. He was there enough to be cool, be a cool bad guy, get killed, see you later.
Yeah.
Darth Maul looked a lot. He was almost like the new Boba Fett. Like he was kind of that mysterious you wanted, just because it was a really good design. Played by Ray Park, who is a real talented martial artist. Count Dooku, Christopher Lee, great actor, very underutilized, I thought, in this film.
Yeah.
Same with Mace Windu. I thought he was very underutilized. Another great actor. Jango Fett, good on tomorrow. He is still riding the Star Wars wave. He is still cashing checks off this franchise.
I've had the privilege of meeting Temuera Morrison when I was at Waikato University. It wasn't a personal meeting, but I got to sit and listen to him talk about stuff, and he's just like, he's exactly what you would expect a top grade Hollywood actor to be like. Just like humble, really, really personable, and just very captivating to listen to. A lot of mana, that guy. He's really like a huge ambassador for New Zealand and Maori culture and Polynesian identity, just in general through his interactions and stuff. Much more so than Rena Wilson, who Rena really wanted to be in the Star Wars franchise, and she hung around. Whenever I was at Armageddon, she was always hanging out with the Star Wars people. It's just like, why are you here? It's a little bit, but I think she would have really liked to be in the movies.
So, for those that don't know, Tamara got famous through a New Zealand film called Once Were Warriors, Rita was his wife in that film. And that's kind of really springboard his career. And also Jar Jar Binks, who I feel really sorry for the actor. It wasn't his fault. But fuck, he's an awful character. It was just so annoying.
I wouldn't have taken it that person. I mean, because you don't recognize him at all. As he's putting on a really weird voice, and he's you don't see his face at all. So I don't see why he couldn't just distance himself from the role entirely and not even worry about it. Just throw it away. So no, that wasn't me. It was the
motion capture stuff they used was really good.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with the way he looked. It's just
Yeah.
Anyway, Fred, that's my list of characters. You can go, mate, on your rant.
You want me to go on a rant?
Oh, there's one more character, Brian Blessed as the Gungan chieftain.
Oh, was he?
Yeah.
Was he?
Yeah.
From Flash Gordon?
Yes. So he decided that was how he was going to play the chieftain, and nobody was going to convince him otherwise. So the whole language that he used, and Mr. like this, that was it. He was a force of nature, and they all just went with it. And I think that was a good idea because he was a very compelling character.
Yeah, no, he's great. He's a great actor.
Yeah.
Right.
There we go.
Okay, Fred.
All right. So for me, the actors that were really good in this movie and well cast for the character they were playing, not necessarily given the best lines or the best character decisions in the script, in the story, but for me, it's Liam Neeson. Pretty much spot on. Really hard to see his character die in the movie. Natalie Portman, except for the fact that she's clearly got no fucking idea who to hook up with. This character made some seriously stupid decisions, and I wouldn't say that the problem was the dialogue; it was the decision making by the character. It's not Natalie, her ability to act that character. That's not the problem.
Mm.
It's this character is getting far too much information about Anakin that should have been left out, that she discovers much later on, that would have sold the whole thing a lot more. And also, Natalie needed to have somebody who actually was worth falling in love with, because Anakin wasn't, not the way it was portrayed. Samuel L. Jackson, I don't think there was anything that Samuel did that I disliked, other than at times he did come across as a stupid Jedi Master, and that's script stuff, decisions the characters were forced into. Ian did a great job as the counselor, and then the Emperor eventually. I think, almost all of his stuff was really good. The only problem I have with that character being portrayed is not the actor, but that Palpatine's plan should never have bloody worked. It should never have worked. It should not have been successful at all. There's no way that one Sith Master can fool a whole raft of Jedi and Jedi Masters. And yeah, that did not sell it to me at all. Christopher Lee, brilliant. I agree that we could have had more of him, and the movies would have been better. And maybe killing him off as early as they did was probably a mistake. I could certainly see Christopher Lee walking through the temple killing like younglings. That I could see, and then Anakin turning on him, just trying to stop him, and then too late, it's done. But yeah, but that's not the characters acting. The actors acting. They did a great job. The ones that were poor actors for me is Ewan McGregor. Terrible at the beginning at Phantom Menace. It was awful, and it was script stuff a lot of the time. But I don't think he was particularly good at playing that character when he started off. He only started to come into it when he's trying to get to Qui-Gon, and Qui-Gon's battling Darth Maul. That's when I suddenly see there's a bit more emotion on his face. He's not supposed to play the stoic Jedi anymore. There's a bit more emotion, and you can see he's actually in a fight that looks pretty hardcore. And he got better and better throughout the other movies, far better than the first one in terms of his portrayal. There were times where his responses, which were scripted, not his acting really, that was scripted, which just didn't make no sense. Like, we're trying to make a funny scene here for what purpose? We did not need to make it funny here. Jake Lloyd, I felt, had times where his acting did not work, and you can see it when he's around a lot of actors that are really good. He just fades into the background. His portrayal is sort of lost. Poor bugger. When he was playing alongside Liam Neeson, he was actually really good. I felt like that worked. And even alongside Padman at times, but as AJ points out, there are so many times where it did not work as well. And the poor bugger got hired by George because he could not deliver the lines as if he had practiced them. Everybody else that they interviewed for the role came out, could put everything out and got it right first time. And Jake would make mistakes all the time. But George decided he wanted Jake rather than the other ones, who were clearly much more professional and more capable actors, because Jake could do the highs and the lows and everybody else was flat like wood. But Jake could not keep it up. He could not. He was not Natalie Portman or Liam Neeson. He was not those sorts of those actors. So he really had a hard time in a situation like this. But I liked his character more and the actor playing it more than I did Hayden Christensen. Hayden had terrible lines to deliver, terrible character decisions to deal with, and I do feel like at times Hayden was not very good at playing that. He really struggled, and I don't know if that's his direction or just his failure as a actor. I think since I haven't seen him in many movies after that, I don't know if that's because, it ruined his career or anything like that, but I just wonder if maybe the script and the dialogue that he had to deliver was so difficult for him to deal with that he's never sort of recovered.
Mm,
Do you know what I mean? So it's hard for me to say whether he is a good actor or bad actor because I've never seen him in anything else.
yeah. I
Jumper.
I,
It's the
I
only
really
film I can
liked.
think of.
Yeah, I really liked the bit where Liam Neeson as Qui-Gon meditates when the force fields lock into place and separate him from Darth Maul. That really, really, more than anything else in the movie, told you everything you needed to know about the difference between the light side and the dark
And
side, the Jedi and the
also
Sith.
what Darth Maul is doing on the other side while he is
Yeah, he's like
meditating is a
slashes.
good
He
yeah.
tests out the
So it
force field,
shows
even
you
though
that-
he knows. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's frustrated.
But it shows you the difference between how a Jedi deals with it and how a Sith deals with
Yeah.
it. You know what I mean? Yeah.
And then when it comes to
yeah.
and then when it comes to Obi-Wan and he's in the same situation, it's like he's poised, he's ready to carry on the fight. So he's kind of like he's not as good a Jedi as Qui-Gon, he's not a Jedi master really. He's too young to take on an apprentice anyway. Yeah. But Qui-Gon was also very independent. So he didn't pay much attention to the Jedi Council either. He did his own thing, and taking on an apprentice was, he on the one hand he said, we're not here to pick up strays. We're here to, we've got a diplomatic mission that we're trying to do. And it was Obi-Wan who's like, I sense something about this thing guy. It's like, keep your mind on the here and now, he says to Obi-Wan. And that was the exact same problem that Luke had as well. That he wasn't trained to stay on target. He focused too much on the prophecy and what could possibly happen. So he had fear the entire time. And so you kind of had that thread developing with the characters.
I think Liam is quite a generous actor as well, and he probably got the best out of Jake, like the scenes he did with Jake. I think he was quite sort of coaching him and helping this young actor. In terms of Hayden, I think he was cast more because of his physicality rather than his presence. Like he was after the height and just the movement of Vader. But yeah, these films could have just done with a decent scriptwriter going over it and just going, "Fuck me, George. What do you? People don't talk like this." And just giving it a bit of a tidy up.
Or just
a lot of
character decisions that just did not make sense. Where actually small changes would have fixed a lot of the problems.
Yeah. Well, it's that the chemistry. There was no chemistry between Natalie Portman and Hayden Christensen. That whole sort of, I don't know what to call it, like love montage they have where they're hanging out together on that planet.
Just... so memed as well. Yeah, riding around on the farty sheep thing was just stupid.
Yeah, and that's meant to be. This is them falling in love, isn't it? That's what that's meant to represent.
Natalie did point out during some interviews that this was the first time that George had ever had to do a romantic story, and you could tell in her voice he's like, I don't know if he's figured it out.
This is a guy that spent a lot of time alone in his bedroom for romance.
Pouring over he'd have fold-outs of hot rods rather than ladies, I'd imagine.
Anything else on the cast and the characters?
Nah, let's do some technology, dude.
Yeah, let's get into the technology, into the effects. So, I mean, it's always been known for its visual effects. I was actually quite surprised how much practical effects were used in these films. I thought it was, I really thought it was CGI, like 99% CGI. But there was extensive amounts of practical effects in each film. So in The Phantom Menace, Tatooine was constructed using real props. The pod race was kind of built to scale, like Fred had said before. There was practical effects used in Camino, were all done was done with miniatures and models, and also sort of most of Mustafar, and the all the Wookiee suits and everything was that was all practical as well.
Mm-hmm.
The first film was mostly shot overseas, whereas Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith was majority filmed back to back in Fox Studios in Australia.
I have one small continuity issue with like right in the first movie when the clone army first shows up on Naboo, they're all brand new off the production line models that are doing their programming and stuff. I thought the personalities of the droids was kind of pathetic. And we really should have seen, like in the Clone Wars, we had the droid commanders, the one who spoke, those were the intelligent, strategic droids that were in charge of the clones and stuff. We only saw the yellow capped sort of sergeants in the movie who were just as stupid as the rest of them.
Roger.
Yeah, so we didn't get to see the fact that the droids were actually a threat, a tactical threat, until the Clone Wars cartoon series, which was pretty good.
I don't like the droid designs in the prequels at all. The masks, and I much prefer the Stormtrooper design to the Clone Trooper design helmet, even though they are meant to be very similar.
Yeah. And it also, we had only suspected that there was a link between the Mandalorians and the Stormtroopers before because of the similarities of design from the original prequels. The original series. That was like the theory that they had something to do with the Mandalorians, but nobody knew what the Mandalorians were. So we got to sort of unveil that a bit more. But yeah. And I would have liked to have seen the droids being a little bit more dinged up at the end of the movie. It would have made it more like you would have had that feeling that the Clone Wars had been going on for some time, that the clones should have been more individualized and more sort of scarred and had some robotic limbs and things like that, patched up and replaced. But they were all squeaky clean from all the way through, which didn't seem very militarily accurate. Like, you look at World War II, for instance, and the start of World War II and the uniforms and stuff of the American military, and then at the end of World War II, it was quite a different kettle of fish.
What you're referring to is a lot of the original movies presented the science fiction world as a used place that was aged. Things were not perfectly new, and nothing was, maintained to a perfect level. It was not
Star Trek.
Squeaky clean. It was not Star Trek. Exactly.
Yeah. You get the feeling that Scotty should have been covered in grease. When he's working on the hyperdrive. Yeah.
It's a busy film as well. There's visually, there's so much going on. It's almost exhausting to sit through them. I feel like physically drained watching the prequel films sometimes because you're almost overwhelmed with the amount of visual effects going on.
Yeah.
I think the sound design in the prequels is amazing. I think it surpasses the original trilogy. It's a mixed bag. I don't think it's aged particularly well. Especially a lot of the CGI, and as we've commented on, they just went nuts with the Jedi, just the green screen somersaulting, fighting stuff.
The Gungan catapults with the energy balls that they're firing at the droids, I thought was ridiculous. I've never been able to it's just ridiculous. Like, where did they come from? Why did they have that level of technology and a slingshot? Essentially, it was just ridiculous. Gungans should have had. They should have gone, and then the ground should have burst open, a big fountain, a geyser of water, and then some big goober fish should have come up and eaten a whole bunch of droids. That would have been cool. That would have been, I understand. They're aquatic creatures. They have sea power. The core of the planet is made of water. That would have been interesting. But no.
Aquaman.
Yeah. Yeah, but no, they're marching into, they're just, it was like a World War II. It was like, they're trying to do some American Revolution thing or something, or pluck at their heartstrings. I don't know. But it just didn't work for me.
Yeah, I still think the pod race is the standout for me out of the three films, even though it's my least favorite out of the three films. I just, like I said before, It just had weight to it.
Yeah. And it had sand
Um,
people.
and it wasn't copy and paste. Like every pod was different, and I
Mm.
appreciate like going back and it did look like something, a hodgepodge thing that
Yeah.
people would build and race in the desert.
That's a real strength. Like that's a strong point of George Lucas because he likes vehicles and drag racing and speed. And so
Yeah.
in the original movie, it was the Death Star run, you know, and in this one, it was the pod racing. And yeah. Mm.
So there is some new
And the speed
technology
bikes.
they developed in these movies, by the way. You guys aware of it?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay.
I'll find out.
Sure. So one of the things that was really abundantly clear, as you guys have kind of mentioned, is there was more of an enormous reliance on digital character acting rather than using makeup and prosthetics. In the first movie, we have a little bit of prosthetic stuff going on, and the more you go into the movies, the more that gets removed and we go digital.
Mm.
You know, so you had a lot of practical effects in the Phantom Menace, and then practical effects started to disappear as we go into the next two movies a lot more. In fact, to the point where often there were not models made, or models were made, but then they were digitally created from the model that was made physically, and just because they had to do too many things with it. Battle scenes were almost exclusively digital modeled rather than a physical model, which is not what we had seen in the first trilogy of movies. It was mostly practical and model effects, right? And so that can sort of look a little like a model, but people liked that effect. They actually they could see weight to a miniature rather than to a digital model. The Phantom Menace introduced actors in motion capture suits with markers on them. This is the first time that it ever came into play because they tried dressing up the actor who was playing Jar Jar in a suit, and it did not work. And so they went through and they realized, well, what we need to do is we just need markers and digitally implant this. And instead of creating the entire thing off and digitally on a computer and then planting it into the movie, we will use markers on the suit. And so they got the actor to go back through and redo all of his scenes, and then they just pull those scenes and then place them back into the movie. So all that stuff got redone 2 or 3 times for that guy. But this is not motion capture where they put dots on your faces. That came much later. They only did that with limbs and body position and the head position. It was not like motion capture nowadays. It's very
It's more
early
like a
days.
stick figure walking around here.
Exactly. And then Attack of the Clones used for the very first time digital camera capture technology, not film. This was what George wanted to do because he wanted to be able to capture digital film rather than digital footage rather than film footage, because you could go back and look at a scene immediately. You didn't have to wait for it to get processed. Dealing with dailies was easier, but you lost a lot of the look of a movie by not using film, by using digital. But this is the first time it came in. And then the Revenge of the Sith movie had a scene that was shot during the filming of episode 2 to save money and hassle. And you can guess what scene that was. That is the scene on Tatooine. So they don't have to do it again. So they're already on Tatooine for Attack of the Clones. They shot that scene where he's on the speeder and dealing with the sand people. So they didn't have to go back and reshoot that because they actually went to a different country to film that. So yeah, if you weren't unaware, that happened that way. And then Revenge of the Sith, but this also happened in Attack of the Clones, but Revenge of the Sith specifically included a huge amount of digital models or character modeling, where the characters, whether they were alien and they weren't human, were animated by a computer programmer who would look into a mirror to try to figure out where things should be. This is because they had not figured out that they should stick motion capture dots on a professional actor's face and just capture that. Instead, the actor's portrayal was removed, their voice was kept, but a computer programmer was now the actor. And I think this is part of the problem with these movies is the removal of prosthetics. If they had used motion capture or had the technology at that time to put dots on actors' faces, an actor's better at portraying the character than a computer programmer. And one of the things that George said is that, well, now we're in the age of computer programmers having to be actors. I think the lack of practical effects throughout the movies got more and more apparent to the audience. The reliance on digital effects, which just did not have enough weight to them. It looked still digital. It looked too flat. Do you know what I mean? Not using miniatures, avoiding prosthetics, and not using real film stock, and using digital digital capture. To the audience who really was expecting what they got from the original trilogy. That's the kind of thing I think they were looking for, and that's what they didn't get. I think that's part of the failure of those movies.
Yeah, I think it's aged. I think we've come around to appreciate them now, though. Looking back, I can see those were the problems I had with it originally, and why I bumped into these films and I didn't like them, and they didn't feel like my trilogy. But in reflection, I've grown to appreciate them and for what he's an innovator, Lucas.
Yeah.
So
it was certainly groundbreaking, that's for sure, and a daunting task. That would you even attempt it in the first place? You had a successful movie franchise, and you're going back to it to make some major significant changes, and pursuing his vision. I'm not convinced that this was all planned out beforehand, that he had all these scripts and stuff in the first place. I think there's a lot
he
of...
didn't have the script. He had the treatments, and I am convinced, because I remember when I was a kid listening on the radio, and he said, I've done this movie. This is the fourth movie, but there are nine stories to tell. And the first three are before Anakin becomes Darth Vader, and tells that story. And then he explained what was supposed to happen later on, briefly, But so I do remember that. So I don't doubt that he had.
I'm just going to say,
treatments.
He must have given the last three to Disney, and they must have gone, "Oh, thanks, George," and just put it in the shredder.
Yeah, I'm reminded of a quote from Peter Jackson where it was one of the initial interviews with him, and he's saying, "I had this idea for Lord of the Rings, and I had these ideas for scenes and stuff like that, but I had." As though I was making the movies and the actors and stuff involved were adding their parts to it, it became much, much greater than my original vision because of the actors, because of the great talent that was involved as well. It wasn't just me. My original ideas for the movie was much less than what it eventually was because of all the input of the people who were involved. And I wonder, if we had some better quality, a bit more experience in the actors, a bit more leeway for the actors and stuff, and less digital stuff, as you say, whether we would have had a much better collaborative effort in the end than what we got. It was a technological marvel, yes, but maybe a lot more old school acting should have been appreciated.
Like being a good game master.
Yeah.
Getting your players involved. All right, we've only got 15 minutes, so the last point I had was expanding the Star Wars universe lore and world building in the prequels. So
yeah,
it did do a lot of that.
Set us up for the Clone Wars series, a cartoon series, which I really enjoyed. I've watched that more times than I have the trilogy.
Yeah, I mean, what we already had Tatooine. We went back to that, but he did sort of try to build on it and build a bit more around it. We had Coruscant, and we really hadn't had much with Coruscant in the past. No, it was, well, if anything, actually. We had Camino, we had Mustafar, we had Naboo, and we had sort of the political structure of the galaxy.
Mm.
So there was an awful lot. And then, of course, all
And
the different races and species and so forth as well.
Yeah, we got also, we have briefly mentioned it, midichlorians.
Oh, please not. Let's not go back there. I leave it alone, guys. It's not what brought those movies down, okay? It would have survived that.
Yeah.
It introduced the Ruler 2 for the Sith as well. I think, that's... I really like that. I thought that was a cool line. The balance of the Force. The rise, obviously, we saw the rise of the Empire and the Clone War, because the Clone War was mentioned in A New Hope as a sort of a throwaway line to Luke from Obi-Wan. And it just did expand on this lore of this universe, and it has now become the building blocks to, like AJ said, the animated stuff like the Clone Wars, Star Wars Rebels, a lot of the new Disney Plus shows, which I'm sure we'll get into. They've taken these little things that George made in these prequels and expanded onto them, and in some ways I think made them better.
They've gone a lot, they've sort of retconned and gone back to the spiritual aspect of it more in later stuff, particularly prophecy and convergence of fates and things like that. And this idea that you have the Force can manipulate organisms as well. So you got the virgin birth of Anakin, and the Acolyte. You've got another sort of thing where a soul is split in two or some such. I don't know. I didn't really pay much attention to that shit show.
At least it's a full circle. This it's got an arc. This trilogy, and it has an ending. Unlike when we get to the next one, just doesn't really go anywhere. This is very much George's vision, and this is the last time George is really involved with Star Wars.
Yeah, he sold his baby.
Yeah. Love it or hate it. I don't know. It wasn't mine. I've grown to like it. I was not a fan when it first came out, and I have grown to appreciate it. Possibly because we've got some shitter ones since.
Yeah. I'm optimistic, and I love sci-fi in everything that in every aspect. So there's a lot to love about Star Wars, and it overshadows the things which are bad. So all in all,
it's like the opposite.
Positive.
It's like the opposite of the next one, where this one starts off crap but gets better, whereas the other one starts off good and gets worse.
Yeah.
So any final thoughts on the prequels?
May the Force be with you.
Well, that was short. AJ does not do usually short. Okay, all right, wow.
The medicine is kicked in.
I'm not on any medicine.
I have 4 or 5 thoughts in closing that occurred to me, and that is that all 3 movies were presented, or really presenting something we had never seen before in the first 3 movies, in the first trilogy. And that was a huge undertaking. And I think, too, given the amount of time that people have had to have little dreams and fantasies and nightmares and wet dreams and whatever else it was around the first 3, getting these movies was sometimes never going to align with that. I think that's something I take from this. Also, too, you could never really succeed with a Star Wars prequel series of 3 movies. You can't succeed when most people really wanted the original 6 key characters back. Now, we got R2-D2. We got C-3PO eventually. We got Chewbacca to a certain degree. Not a lot, but a little bit. But we did not get Luke Skywalker. We did not get Leia. And we did not get Han Solo. And I think that is one of the things that really stuffed things up, was not going back to those 6 characters. They really needed to go there. When you already know the outcome for a key character in a story, the surprise is gone.
Mm.
And because I'd already seen, A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi, they were never going to have the impact that they needed to have on me, because I knew what happens to Anakin. I know he becomes Darth Vader. I've already been told. And, I think a lot of people don't realize, even though there were some great actors in the prequels, really people wanted to see Mark Hamill, Harrison Ford, and Carrie Fisher back.
Mm.
They really wanted the original actors back in the movies, and that's not what they got. They got something else.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people forget how pushy Mark Hamill was. He forced George to change dialogue in the movies, because there were times where he said, George, I cannot say that. That doesn't make any sense. Harrison Ford did the same. And Carrie Fisher, because the other two were doing it, was also able to push back and say, look, George, I don't think that's going to work. She actually used to go to George's assistant and say, look, I don't like this line. This line doesn't work. Can you please talk to George about it? She used to go and do the roundabout route, whereas Mark and Harrison would just go, George, people do not talk like this.
People do not talk, and that's
Yeah.
evident in the prequels.
But also decision making, so a lot of that's there. The other thing, there's two other things that I can think of, and that is, there was a little bit of stuff that I found about the Obi-Wan character. In the first movie, the plan was that Liam Neeson would play Obi-Wan, and that Ewan McGregor would play Qui-Gon, and that Liam Neeson's character Obi-Wan would die in the first movie and be killed by Darth Maul, and that Qui-Gon, played by McGregor, would be so upset by the loss of his master, he would take on his name. And I actually thought that was an interest. It's more complicated for sure, but I actually really like that concept. I thought that could work a lot more, and would explain a lot more for the other three movies, where he's not quite so familiar with stuff you think he should be familiar with, and it becomes sort of weird. Is he actually Obi-Wan, or is he just somebody who's taken on the name? And I thought that was an interesting way of sort of looking at that. I know some people don't like that.
Dread Pirate Roberts.
Yeah. The name is just passed on over time. So I thought that was interesting. When I think about this, if you were to watch these movies again, I know some people say watch the originals first, but I think a new generation to watch these movies should start with the prequels. Watch The Phantom Menace first, watch The Attack of Clones, then do not watch The Revenge of the Sith, the third movie. Do not watch that movie. Then go and watch the cartoon series, Attack of the Clones, and get attached to an Anakin who at times is a dick, but also has some sort of, you can build a connection to him, because he's got some times where he's actually not a dick in the cartoon, which you don't really see in the movie, when Hayden's playing it. So I think that would be the smart thing. And then what you do is you go and you go watch the New Hope movie, and then you go and watch The Empire Strikes Back, and you get that revelation that Darth Vader is actually Anakin Skywalker, because you won't know at that point, unless, of course, you've encountered on the internet. I'm going to have to find a 5-year-old or something.
Or
like
watch
that.
Rogue One in between there as well.
Oh, possibly. Yeah. That'd be a good idea. Yeah. And then watch Return of the Jedi, and then watch the last one be Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah.
And I think that would be the order that I would go with nowadays.
Yeah. You can throw away the Han Solo movie. That was good, but it's not necessary.
It was all right, isn't it?
That's fine.
I would have liked to see more of an origin of the Millennium Falcon. That would have been cooler.
All right, we'll wrap it up there, eh?
Yeah.
We're almost out of time. So, thanks everyone. That was a controversial way of. I've never heard anyone recommend that order. So
it's because
chronological.
You get the surprise in Empire Strikes Back that Anakin is Darth Vader.
My brain's sort of getting around all the plot points to follow your logic, but yeah, it does does make sense.
Yeah. Also, it really sets
Right.
up the tragedy of Ahsoka as well.
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll get into more Star Wars. It's an easy 2 hours. Sorry, we didn't get into any letters or anything. AJ is away next week. So I believe me and Fred might dive in. We'll have a week with the new Dungeon Master's Guide. So
while the cat's away,
we'll
the mice will play.
give our initial thoughts on that next week.
Yeah.
So,
Nacho will be the light side, the Jedi, and I will be the Sith reviewer for the Dungeon Master Guide.
I can tell you right now that
Yeah.
generally speaking, I'm positive about the Dungeon Master's Guide. I haven't even read it yet, and I already like some of the stuff that I see. So I'm holding out for good. But
Yeah.
I'm just about to start reading it this afternoon. So there you go.
There we go. All right. Well, thanks everyone. So that's good night from me.
Good night from them.
And that's good night from somebody else. I think that's me.
Yeah. That is you, mate. Good night.